Hey everyone, welcome to Behind the Bar. I'm your host, Danny Johnson, where I interview your favorite dry bar comedians. With me today, very funny, Tim Steele.
How's it
Welcome.
going?
That name is not a comedian's name. It is like like an NBC news anchor. I could just say, Tim Steele reporting live from Times Square.
Well, some of my performances come off like I'm an NBC news anchor, you know.
Yeah, we've all had those gigs where you're in the middle of telling a joke. I'm like, am I delivering a speech here? Is there any
Is my
these
is my mic on?
yeah. These jokes worked many, many times. And I don't know what your problem is, people.
Right?
But yeah, your dry bar special is called Trophy Husband, right?
Yes.
And I thought I saw a clip of you on Huckabee. I couldn't tell if it was on Huckabee or warming up Huckabee.
I went down and warmed up for the crowd at Huckabee.
Okay, yeah. Because I've had many, many guests that have done the same thing on this podcast, and they said that experience is sometimes almost as nerve-wracking as filming your comedy special.
Yeah, they told me before I got there that I had 7 minutes, and then when I got there, I had six,
Mm,
and there's a clock going. I'm really keen on trying to stick to my time.
right.
Whenever I'm performing, I try really hard to stick to my time. But you have a countdown clock, and they're telling you better stick to that.
Yeah.
And so I had a story joke, and then I had a couple of liners in there, and so like I had like a minute and 10 seconds, and it would have been better for me to end early, or do I go for it? And so I made the decision to go for it and go with more material. And when I still had to introduce the MC.
Okay.
And when I introduced his name, I had 2 seconds left on the clock,
Wow.
and I was sweating it. And I'm telling you, that was hard, because I had never had a clock where I had to be finished on that deadline.
Yeah.
And but it was, I had been told by a variety of people that Governor Huckabee was extremely kind, and he couldn't have been nicer. He took time with you. Um, he could have been nicer to me, my guests that came with me. It was a really nice experience.
Yeah, that's great. I think the only thing I compare it to that I've ever experienced is working in casinos. They're super strict on time, and they explain to you every minute that they're in here listening to you, they are not gambling money. So when we tell you do 60 minutes or do 45 or do 10, whatever slot you're in, you do that amount of time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think it's just being respectful.
Yeah.
I've seen guys not go over their time. Uh, go I've seen guys go 15, 20 minutes over their time, and
Ugh.
that's a good way not to be invited back.
Yeah.
If you're featuring for somebody. And so I really do try to really stick within my time limits. But that was kind of scary when you're looking at the clock as you're performing.
It's like a countdown to
Yeah.
wrap it up. And then you're hoping you get to like that minute mark and you're hoping, gosh, I hope my closing bit works as well as I want it to. And then sometimes I'll have a backup quick joke, in the case it doesn't hit hard and it's really tough to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a nice experience, but he was taping extra, some extra opening while we were there. And
Okay.
so they hit me with less time when I showed up. And so I had worked really hard uh, on the time limit they'd given me. And so that's what threw me, was when I got there. That's
Yeah.
when I told, man, you've lost a whole minute. And when you lose a whole minute, that can mess you up.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the flip side, when I talk to really, really, really new comedians and they're like, I'm doing my second, third, fourth, or first open mic, and they're giving me 5 minutes, I'm like, do 2 minutes. You don't have to stretch it. This is your first time. Get your feet wet. And they're like, oh, 2 minutes is nothing. I'm like, maybe 2 minutes of rambling is nothing, but give them 2 minutes of funny, and then next open mic, give them three, and then and then build from there. But do I think too many new folks want to show, oh, I can do all sorts of time and this and that and
And that's great advice because the guy who's running the open mic will remember that.
yeah,
He will remember 2 minutes of funny versus
absolutely.
5 minutes of, because he's going to remember the rambling more than anything.
Yeah, and the audience will, if it's a place where that gets regulars, they'll be like, "Oh, that guy was good. Is he coming
Hmm.
back next week or whatever?"
Right.
Build on it. Your dry bar special. What did you? Well, let me ask you this about Huckabee. That's in Nashville, and you're in Detroit. Were you
Right.
in? And they took care of you. They bring you down, or were you? Did you work it in with a tour schedule?
No, I actually have family in the. I went to school in Nashville area, and I lived there probably about 8, 9 years during the time I went to school, and then after school, and then I have relatives. My family tree is in Tennessee, and
Okay,
so going down and doing Huckabee, um, it was a little mini vacation for me to
that's
stay with
fantastic.
family,
Yeah.
and they pay you. It's kind of interesting. They pay you when you open for Huckabee. They don't pay you when you're
When
on
you're,
the show.
yeah, when you're a guest.
Yeah. So when you're on the show, you get the promo, but if you open, you get a nice check.
Yeah, yeah. I talked to I had a guest on here who did Comedy Central's Premium Blend television show years and years ago when they had like I think it was an hour long and they had or maybe less and had like three comics doing 10 minutes and he gets paid for the TV spot, but the he had to join the union and the union fee, the SAG after a union. So the pay was almost equal, if not more, a little less than the fee to join the union. So it
Right.
was it was a wash. It was just for the credit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then you're in the union for the year, so you can, that's a benefit. But what surprised me most about your dry bar special was I'm surprised you got that woman in the audience to tell you how much weight her husband gained after they got married. I can't believe you asked it, and I can't believe she answered.
I was too. I figured if she didn't answer, they could edit it out. Why not ask and just go for it? Um, I hope that marriage is still together
Yeah.
and they're still happily married.
What's
Uh,
your success rate in asking that question to an audience, or was that your first time?
I normally don't ask that directly. Uh, I I I had I had not been working a lot before I did dry bar. Um, I had been working on my doctorate.
Okay.
And so when they contacted me to do dry bar, I was in the midst of writing my paper for my doctorate. And so I had been taking most of the summer off and had been putting in hours of writing.
Right.
And so here I get a call. I was really excited about doing dry bar, and yet I hadn't been performing like I normally do. And so I felt like the first show was just getting my legs back under me.
Yeah, I bet.
And because I had, normally I'm performing quite, several times a weekends a month, and so here I go out there. I'm kind of hadn't been out in about 8 weeks, and so here I'm. This is a big opportunity for me, and I was all excited. And the first one, it was like I did the show, I hit all my marks, but it wasn't my normal
Mm-hmm.
excitement level.
Yeah.
And then the second show and that was off my second show, and I just thought the second show, I got something that's recorded. My second show, I just went, I'm just going for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I asked that question, and I even normally probably wouldn't have went that in depth and did that.
Yeah.
And that's what they kept, and played well.
Yeah, I think
So
that's the big that's a pretty common experience from my guest and myself. My first show, super nerve-wracked, backstage waiting. I'm like, because it's being filmed, you have limited um you have the chance to give feedback on what you want and don't want. Ultimately, you don't. Ultimately, put together what they want to put together.
right.
How do I look? What's my set list? What's this? And then you get announced. And so my first show was good. At my second show was better. And I think they didn't tell me, but if I had to guess, it was mostly second show with maybe the few jokes from the first show edited in.
Well, I thought they did such a good job of, and I don't even, sometimes when you go back, you don't even know where those cameras were and how they shot the audience.
Right.
I just thought they did a really good job of shooting that lady and her husband as I was talking to them, and I was very happy with how they edited that. But
Yeah.
it was like the second show was like, okay, I've got what I needed.
Yep.
Let me just have fun. I've got that under my belt. Let's just get back to being me. And like I said, I really had not worked in 2 months because I've been just cranking out. Um,
Yeah, the best
yeah,
thing you can do when you're recording is to pretend you're not recording, and that's the
mm-hmm,
hardest part, because you
yeah,
got one shot potentially.
you're right. And you just, this dry bar for a clean comedian is a big deal. You get your shot and you really don't
Yeah.
want to mess it up.
Yeah.
And
Did you get your doctorate, your PhD?
yeah, I did. I got my doctorate. I have a doctorate of ministry,
Okay.
and so when you watch my comedy, I do a really good job of hiding my education. You would not you would not see that I am a educated man.
So I mentioned at the top of the podcast that your name sounds like a newscaster, but now if you're Dr. Steele, you're more like an evil villain with a lair.
Yeah,
You're an evil character in a movie. Dr. Steele and his
Doctor
henchmen.
Steele. Yeah, yeah,
So from now on, we'll have to refer you as Dr. Steele.
yeah. So I
So you're a pastor? Is that what
am a
the
pastor. I've been pastoring. I've been in the ministry since I was 18 years old, and I am a. I've only been doing comedy since 2013,
Okay.
and that was kind of interesting. I've always wanted to do comedy. I was one of those kids that would watch, the A&E comedy specials. I'm that old where I would
Yeah,
watch
A&E night at the
those.
Improv. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that stuff. I used to love watching that, and uh, I'd watch Johnny Carson, the comedy guys on Johnny Carson. I love that stuff, and so always wanted to try it.
Yeah.
And so in 2013, we've got Mark Ridley's Comedy Castle
Yeah.
here in Royal Oak, Michigan, outside of Detroit, and it's a pretty well known comedy
Yeah.
club, and they've got pictures of all the greats, all the great comedians. They've got pictures of them on the walls through the years, and so I talked 8 other pastors into taking a comedy class at
Wow.
Mark Ridley's, and you know you take a comedy class, you the graduation you have to get on stage,
Right.
and I knew that I'd have people want to come, and in the graduation class, it's going to be kind of blue because of other kids. So
Right.
I called them and said, how many guys do I have to have my own class? And they said you have to have 8. So I had 9 of us, and we had a blast. And the guy that was our teacher was so respectful, but he's one of the bluest comics in Michigan, and we we tried to get him to get up and do stuff for us, and he wouldn't even get on stage in our practices. He wouldn't even do it.
Right.
He was such a nice guy, and he was so helpful to us. And we packed that place out because all of our churches came. We
Yeah.
had buses for our graduation night. We had buses came in, and we had so much fun. And it was, the guy's been doing comedy in Michigan for years, and he had me go last. He felt like I had a really good set, and he had me go last, gave me the longest time, and that was just all the the impetus I needed to
Right.
keep doing this. And then I was using comedy as a fundraiser,
Mm,
and I had a local guy. I had a guy coming off a Carnival cruise ship was coming up, and he got kidney stones. And his agent got a couple of guys to fill in for him from Michigan. And so I worked with these guys.
right.
And then these guys, because they were from Michigan, they liked working with me. And next thing you know, they're using me locally,
Right.
and they're introducing me to guys. And so it was not long. I started working. I did not do the open mic thing.
Right.
And I've been working very regularly since
Yeah.
2013.
Well,
And
that's
it's just
great.
been a lot of fun.
Any of the other pastors stick with it?
Not really. One of the guys has retired and he's been a chaplain at a um, what do you call it, where they've got the you know
Like one,
where you live in a thing where you drive. What do you call that?
oh, the motorhome or something?
Yeah, he's a chaplain in a mobile home in Texas in the winter, and then in Wisconsin in the summertime. And he does that, and so he will do maybe 2-3 shows a year at those little camps where he's at,
Right.
and then that's about it. The other
Yeah.
guys, it's just something that they have just fond memories of doing,
Yeah.
but that's about it. I'm the only guy that they would, if you ask those guys, I'm the only one they would
Yeah.
say
I'm
is
sure the
real.
comedy class was still helpful though. For any public speaker, I'm sure it was very, helpful in kind of adding humor and when they hopefully talked about timing and cadence and word choice and all stuff like that.
Well, the biggest thing that our coach, our teacher, really worked on was to get to the joke.
Yeah.
One of the things that we ministers have an issue at is we spend too much time in the story and not getting to the point.
You mean to tell me pastors are long-winded? Is this groundbreaking news?
You know who it's groundbreaking news to? Us pastors. You know what I mean? It's not groundbreaking to anybody else, but to us pastors. And so he was constantly saying, guys, just get to the joke. That's
Right.
you're a great, that's a great story you got there. Just get to the joke. And he worked really hard with us to get to the joke. And
Right.
I can't tell you how many times I've used that in the last decade in just
Yeah.
working with young preachers on helping them just get to their story. You don't need all the extra stuff you've thrown in there.
It's
Just
like,
get to the
yeah,
point you're trying to tell.
you're not writing your doctorate paper where you need to fill X number of words.
Right.
When I first started, I would, and I can't remember if somebody told me to do this or not, but probably I used to write my set out word for word, highlight where I thought I would get a laugh, and then do that set, and then listen to it with the script that I wrote before and compare where I actually got the laugh, if at all. And then it helped me tighten up too much, it's too much no highlighting here, and tighten up those jokes. But yeah, that's crucial. One thing I noticed about doing shows in churches, especially even the smaller ones, when I'm in a club or even a private show at a neighborhood or whatever, or a corporate show, I tell, you tell a joke punchline, and then sometimes I'll have 2 or 3 taglines after a punch to keep the laughter rolling and building. But I notice when I do churches, when I do the punchline, laugh, and then when I go to speak again to do the tag, they immediately quiet themselves, and then they'll laugh again with, it's almost like they're trained when the pastor or whoever has the microphone is speaking, be quiet. and I want that laughter to trickle over from the previous. I thought that was an interesting dynamic to some of the church gigs that I've done.
That's a really good point. So much of whether a comedy will work in a church is really goes to the pastor.
Yeah.
I can tell for the most part, just talking to the pastor before the show, if I'm going to have a good show or not.
Oh, wow. Okay.
If the pastor has, now again, he doesn't have to be funny. Like for me, I use a lot of I never I don't tell jokes in my messages. I'm not a joke teller.
Okay.
I will say things that are humorous. I'll say them in a humorous way,
Right.
but I don't tell jokes. And but I'll say things humorously. But you'll talk to a guy, and if he has no sense of humor at all, his people normally within 2 to 3 years, when a pastor takes a church, his people will become like him, and
Right.
they will take on his personality. And if they don't like him, they'll leave. They'll go to another church. And
Right.
so, if that pastor has a sense of humor, his people will have a sense of humor. If he is a dud, with somebody who is not funny at all,
Right.
people typically are not funny.
Right. Because the people that
So,
come there, and then the new folks that come there, they come there because they've heard this guy is stoic or,
yeah,
whatever.
he might be deep in his teaching, but he's just not fun. And
Right.
so those guys typically won't have comics because they just don't have that kind of sense of humor.
Right.
And so you normally don't run into that, but sometimes they'll hire a youth pastor who he's the guy that works the social calendar, and he's the one who booked the comedy guy. And you'll come there and meet the pastor and go, oh man, this crowd is a kind of a dead crowd just because they're used to listening to a pastor who
Yeah.
never's funny and doesn't encourage humor. And so this is going to be a fun night. And so you got to just work a little harder at that.
Yeah. That's funny that I had a phone call today with human resources of a insurance company that I'm doing a show for next week. And it's a town hall meeting in an auditorium. And they typically every year have a motivational speaker. And they said, it's kind of becoming stale and it's not very entertaining. And they listen to all these numbers and reports, and then the motivational speaker comes into. So I said, okay, so who am I following? They go, well, the CEO is going to speak for about an hour. They're going to do a little 10-minute break, and then everybody knows there's a comedian coming right after. And I said, is the CEO jovial? Is he super straight? Is he loosey goosey? What am I following here? And she said, well, he's not super stiff, but he's also, you got to remember, delivering the numbers for an hour. So you may have your work cut out for you, but at least I know what I'm getting into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, one of the things about churches, this is stuff that I talk about all the time because I'm kind of known. We got a pretty good comedy scene in Michigan. We have some really good guys up here,
Yeah.
and
You know, do you
we've
know
got.
Andy Beningo?
I know Andy very well.
Yeah.
And in fact, I talked to Andy on the phone. I've talked to Andy on the phone. I think it was last week. I talked to him on the phone.
He's one of my he was a guest, and his episode is one of the highest rated.
Andy's Andy's a super guy, and probably Andy's probably helped me more than any other comedian. He's just a great guy,
Yep, for sure.
and I just think the world of Andy. And um, I have a lot of guys up here want to do more church work,
Right.
and if you typically make more money working in churches than you would a club, and
But
I
they're
just
very,
tell people,
they have to know, and I'm sure you've told them that churches are very hesitant about who they hand the
yeah,
microphone to.
yeah, very hesitant. And and I have guys that will call me and they say, I have a clean act, and I say, church clean, clean is not church clean. And a
Correct.
lot of comics don't understand that clean and church clean are not the same.
Right.
And I have to give examples of what the difference is between clean and church clean. And that doesn't mean it's squeaky clean. It just means you don't talk about, you don't say, I'm living with my girlfriend, and she just gives me the hardest time every morning. Well, you don't talk about living with your girlfriend, because the church teaches
Right.
you
Right.
shouldn't be living with your girlfriend. The church teaches that you should be married, or you don't live with your girlfriend. And so you just have to understand what the church teaches is right and wrong. And
Right.
so if you don't know that, you can go in and ruin a set because you're doing what you think is funny. I had a guy tell me, he says, I think I got a bit, and it actually is a funny bit. And it's not going to sound funny, but it is funny. He has a bit where he calls a hockey team by wine names. All right. And we're up here in Detroit. We have the Red Wings, and he calls a hockey team by different wine names. And he says, I've done this in a Catholic church, and it went over really well.
Right.
And so he was telling me he was going to do at this church, and he told me the denomination. And I said, I wouldn't do that. And he said, why not? It went over really well at a Catholic church. And I said, well, first of all, that denomination that you're going to do that church for, they are teetotalers. They don't drink alcohol. And
Mm.
many of them have never drank alcohol, and they won't even get the references that you're giving.
Right. Right.
And you're gonna do jokes that many of them aren't going to get because they don't know wine names.
Yeah.
And so that is, it's just, if you don't understand that kind of stuff, it's a different world.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I enjoy doing, I love working with comedians that I love working in clubs. I love working with comedians that are not what I would call from a Christian background, that don't
Right.
have faith. I love working with those guys. But I'll get emails from guys because I'm like the only pastor they've ever met,
Right.
and they'll
Right.
they'll send me theological questions and things like that. I love that stuff.
Yeah. I got a ton of theological questions. Where I have a book I'm looking for. Um, what's the literary term for um for I guess not disbelief, but like
Agnostic.
yeah, but it's like it's a term where you're trying to refute or the stories in the Bible, and it's a study of that. So I think it starts with an A.
Apologetics.
Yes, apologetics. I got a book on that, and I have a ton of questions. So maybe I'll text you outside of this. So
Well, feel free. I love doing that stuff.
I worked. You'll get a kick out of this. I worked with a feature act recently. There's an MC and feature, and she goes, I'm really trying to work on my clean set. We had two shows that night, and she goes, I'm going to do one clean set, one dirty set. And I'm like, you do whatever you want. So at the end of the night, we're settling everything up, and she goes, what did you think of my clean set? I go, which one was it? Which I don't know which one was the clean one. She's like, oh my gosh, I have so much work to do. I'm like, well, it depends on the venue. You can do whatever you want. I'm all for, I mean, comedians are my favorite people of all
Right, right.
kinds. It could be a puppeteer, anybody that gets up there and has the gumption to do. And I just love talking to comedians. So I try to have clean openers, but if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. I'll do my best. But it's funny enough, there was a crowd that came in, and she was up there, and they left the show. It was about table six, and before they left the showroom, while she was up there, they said, "When are you going up?" And I guess on the website they had put that I'm a clean comedian. So I said, "Oh, I'm going up in 10 minutes." So they hung out in the lobby for 10 minutes, then came back. And I was like, "Yeah, that's your preference, but um, interesting
Well,
too."
one of my issues is that I have to be around on Sundays, and so I typically will work mostly in the Midwest, so I
Mm,
can I 5, 6 hours.
Right.
If you know, I've gotten home at 4 in the morning and then been in the pulpit, you know,
Yeah.
at 11 o'clock in the morning and doing my message. You know, I don't like to do that often, but I have done
Yeah.
that. And so for me, that's an issue. But I know of a minister's son. His father is really well-known pastor, um, and he is a full-time comedian. And I know I did this for. I opened and featured for Jimmy Walker, JJ Walker of
Right.
Good Times. You remember them?
Yeah.
You know, he wants a guy who will not cuss.
Hmm.
So he wants an opener. And so this guy travels, and like I said, his dad is a big time, well known pastor, and his grandfather's even a bigger name who's a pastor, and he travels all the time as a clean comedian
Yeah.
who does not cuss, but he opens for well-known comedians, really well-known comedians
Yeah.
who want
No names you
opener.
don't want to name drop?
It's Andrew Stanley. I don't know if you know
Oh
Andrew.
yeah.
He's out of Atlanta. He's a great guy. I worked with him. Was it April?
What's his father? Peter?
No, his father's name is Andy Stanley,
Yeah.
and he's got several campuses in the Atlanta
Huge.
area. Big,
Huge.
big, big churches. And then his grandfather's deceased, and his name was Charles Stanley, who
Hmm.
was a huge pastor on TV. Charles Stanley was a
Yeah.
leader in the Southern Baptist denomination.
Yeah.
And then his dad is huge, Andy Stanley.
Yeah.
And then Andrew is a comedian, and I worked with him this year up here in Michigan. Great guy, just
Yeah.
a young guy. But he was telling me some of the guys he has traveled with, and I was just
Yeah.
blown away with some of the names. And they just want a good, funny, clean
Yeah.
guy who doesn't swear to feature for them.
Sometimes I'll get a request to open for a real big name, or a bigger name, and they want someone super clean, and then I'm just assuming they're clean, and then they get up there and they're filthy. They just don't want the double hit on the audience of the dirty jokes or whatever. I always wanted to do this joke about a pastor at a church event, but I never had confidence enough to do it because I don't want it to come across like I'm making fun of the pastor. But I did notice this about pastors. It's a very hard job, and one of the reasons it is a hard job is that, much like a psychologist or a therapist, people often are very comfortable unloading the weight of their lives on you after service, in between service, at the grocery store, and it goes on and on. And you don't know them, maybe their name, their face is familiar. They go to your church,
Mhm.
and they're telling you the deepest, darkest personal secrets. And I noticed a trick that, I don't know if it's a trick. I probably wouldn't use that word. Here's how pastors get out of conversations like that. Um, and they'll cut someone off mid sentence if they're like 18 minutes into this, dumping their problems on them at Walmart in aisle 9, and they'll just quickly put their hand on the shoulder. Let's pray for you about this. And they'll go right into the prayer. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this opportunity to, and if that's how they end it, I'm like, I need that. I need that in my life. If someone's going on and on and on, I just put my hand on their shoulder. Heavenly Father, why don't we just take a moment of silence here? And but I never, I've told it to some pastors that I know, and they're like, that's funny. But they go, a lot of times senior pastors don't want to be called out, something they may actually do, in front of their congregation. So I was like, okay, I'll just keep it for my personal, you know, entertainment.
Well, that's the kind of thing John Chris would do.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know John,
I don't know
but
him, but I know who he is. Yeah.
yeah, John would call that out because his dad is a pastor.
Hmm.
Um, it
Yeah. If
just
your dad, if,
depends.
yeah.
It the bigger the church, the more you could get away with that. Because when you're in these big churches, the average when you're in a church of 1,000 people or more,
Yeah.
everybody knows the pastor, but they don't know the pastor
Right.
because the pastor can only know really about 150 people,
Yeah.
and that's about all he can really know.
Yeah.
And everything else is he just can't have a relationship with more than that.
I think it
Uh,
would work. I mean, that joke would really work well if, and I would probably never be heckled at a church, and I've never been heckled at a church. But if I did that joke towards the beginning and then I got a heckler or someone that wouldn't stop talking, I would just do that to them in the middle of the show. Like, Heavenly Father, why don't we just have just reach out, put my hand out. Let's lay some hands on that person, especially their mouth. Why don't we lay some
yeah,
hands on their mouth?
that's not that's not bad. That's not bad. But it's you have people that just don't know how um, they don't know how to get to the point of a prayer request.
Mm,
Just like we were saying about you know learning how to tell a joke, how to get to the point, how to get to the punchline. You'll have people that will go on and on telling you all the ins and outs, and it's like they just don't know how to sum up.
well, I think
You know,
too that probably tells you they have no one to talk to.
yeah, yeah.
And then they found someone with an ear who they respect, who's a person of faith, and and maybe sometimes it's a little selfish that they want some help, some maybe I don't know, they want something, but um yeah, it's probably an indication they don't have anybody. So it's weird that you have to have that mix of empathy and you have other members of your congregation you need to tend to as well.
And I'm one of those guys too. I tell my people I have a weak stomach.
Yeah.
Tell me that your aunt is sick. I don't need to know what her rash looks like. You know what I'm saying? I
It's a
I
green purplish hue with
yeah,
some
I don't need
ooze.
to know that. I don't need to know what's oozing out of her, out of her sores. I don't care. Just say pray for my aunt and I will do that.
Right.
Don't give me a blow by blow detail.
Right. Right. Well, look, biglaughssmallchurch.com is where they can find you, right?
Yes.
And Tim Steele on all social media. I do end my podcast with 5 questions. It's not a lightning round, it's just 5 questions that are the same for every single guest. So if you don't mind indulging me, we'll go through these questions real quick. Um, Comedy influences, who are they? Living or deceased?
Comedy influences. Um, who I used to really influence me long before I got into comedy was Richard Jennings.
Yes.
Uh, I used to watch anytime he was on. I used to watch Richard. Um, I just sad to see what happened to him
Yeah.
with his depression, but I just thought he was a mastermind and would love to see what he would have continued to do. You mentioned Andy. Andy has been extremely helpful for me starting late in my life.
Yeah.
Andy's been very helpful. Down your way, is a guy, Al Ernst has been very helpful. I don't know if you know.
Yeah. Big Al.
Big Al has been very helpful working with me. I've worked with Al for quite a bit now over the years.
How'd you meet him? He's down here.
I met Al on a Carnival cruise ship and brought him up here. And he and I have worked together on several shows up here in Michigan.
Oh,
And
so you weren't on the ship
I
working.
wasn't on the ship, but he has come to Michigan and has worked on several different tours up here in Michigan, and I've worked with him up here.
How
And
fantastic
then
is that? Yeah.
Al and I will, if I'm on the road traveling, I'll call Al and we've talked. And Al's just a great guy. He's been a very big help. So, but
Yeah,
you know,
that's fun.
and then I've been involved. I've been involved. There's the Christian Comedy Association, the
CCA, yeah.
CCA, and there's been a bunch of guys in there that have always loved to listen to. Some of those guys have been doing this for a long time, and it's always you can learn from just about anybody that's been doing this a while.
Yeah. I've always wanted to do the CCA annual convention. I don't know the last time I did it, but I've always chosen to make money rather than the cost of going to a fest,
Mm-hmm.
a conference like that. Maybe I'll have to do it. Next question. It's really centers around, can you think back to your childhood or young adulthood about, is there an event or person that sparked your interest in humor? Like I remember as a young kid, my grandfather telling me my first joke ever, and everyone laughed, and I realized the power of that when I was like 9 or 10. I was like, "Wow, that's funny, and that's a great reaction." And then I started watching the comics on Carson and A&E Night at the Improv. But my family we grew up almost like a bunch of comedians. We're constantly poking fun at each other and imitating one another and whatnot. Anything from your young adult or childhood you could think of?
Well, when I couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old. I came across a distant cousin in Tennessee who was a of my father's, who was a magician comedian,
Okay.
and which none of us knew. And he was never in town when we were there, and he came through and put on in a living room of an uncle's house for
Right.
me and my brother and my dad and my mom. He did a personal show for us and literally blew us away, and did, you know, his little magic and comedy. And I've never forgotten that. And I just thought, wow, just hold people's attention,
Yeah.
and just have them eating out of your hand. I just
Yeah.
thought was incredible.
Yeah. I think if I had to psychoanalyze my life as a kid too, when you talk about holding people's attention, I'm the oldest. I grew up the oldest of five in a Catholic household, so um constantly yearning for attention, maybe. I
Mm-hmm.
gotta, constantly a new kid coming into the house all the time, growing family, and I'm like, hey, what about the old guy? Next question. Favorite place to perform? Do you have a place that kind of is a special place in your heart?
Well, for me, I love working. I grew up in a very small church, and I love doing shows in small churches when they're never able to, they've never been able to afford to have anybody big.
Right.
And so I've worked in churches where they run a couple thousand people on Sunday, and they're used to bringing in big names or big,
Yeah.
they'll bring in a big name athlete or a NASCAR person or whatever. But you work in a small church of 60 people or whatever,
Yep.
and you're the biggest, hottest thing they've ever had. And those people walk out of there laughing, and they go,
Yeah.
that was a blast.
Yep.
And I just think that is really cool.
Yep.
Um, I like working clubs. I like working churches more than clubs, but I work clubs just to make sure I'm still relevant.
Right. Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I enjoy club churches more. I just enjoy performing. But for me, I like working a club because when I walk out of a club and everybody walked out having fun,
Yeah.
laughing at my stuff, I go, okay, I still have it. I can still do my clean stuff, and people walk out of there going, that was fun. I still have it, and I do that more for me. When I work for churches, I'm doing it for them, but I work a club for me to say, do I still have the funny chops? If that
Right.
makes sense.
Yeah. No, I get it. Last question. If you want to have to edit this because you're a pastor too, if you weren't a comedian and pastor, what do you think you'd be doing for a living?
If I wasn't a if I wasn't a comedian and a pastor,
Was there sometime early in your life where you're like, I think I'm going to be a whatever ninja or something?
I like teaching, and
Yeah.
so I would probably be doing something in the financial world, something. Uh, I've spent most of my life not having money, so I'd want to do something that I could teach,
Right.
that that made me some financial
Right. I was gonna say if
benefits.
you're just a regular teacher and
Yeah.
you're gonna be used to having no money.
So I wouldn't want to just be an educator. I'd want to do something like if I did financial planning or something where there could be, you know, a stockbroker or something where I'm teaching people about money and things where I could get something from it.
Yeah.
I would like that, where I feel like I'm educating people and there would also be a financial benefit from it, because then you don't go into the ministry for money. That's
Right.
that I could tell you from my perspective, and in my denominational background, you do not do this for financial gain.
Right. Right. Right.
And if
Yeah.
there is, I haven't found that vein yet, where that money is.
Yeah. The another joke I would never do in church would be sometimes I've worked for what they call a love offering, and then you get it at the end, and you're thankful, but you're really like, it was really more like a like offering. It wasn't really a love. I mean,
You sure didn't love me, did you? That was
right,
for
right. You
sure.
definitely
That
you
was for
liked
sure.
it. But look, Tim Steele, Trophy Husband is the dry bar special. Go ahead and please watch that. Big Laughs Small Church. That's with an S. Big Laughs Small Church.com is the website. I'm glad you did this, and I hope our paths cross. I really appreciate you doing
I hope
this.
so too, Danny. I really enjoyed talking to you. This has been a lot of fun for me.
Yep, we'll hopefully do something to do a show together soon.
I would love to, and I'll tell Andy you said hey, and if you run into Big Al, tell him I said hi.
I will. I will. Hang on there for a second, and we'll get this episode out there this week. So, but I'll tag you.
All right.
All right. See you.